behalf of the Bermuda Football Association Referees Committee, I would like to once again say thank you very much for agreeing to take some time out to speak to the referees and also the coaches here in Bermuda. For those that don't know, say it again, Mr. Webb is someone that has done, as I said, been to the pinnacle. I remember he refereed the World Cup final in South Africa. My team was Holland playing Spain. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but it's one of those things. And he was someone who I've always looked up and respected. And it was my hope to get him to come to Bermuda, but COVID said otherwise. So now, guys, this is your chance to
I think he's popped off, but we'll get started. We'll get started. Well, first of all, good evening, Mr. Webb. Hope all is well. First question, obviously, when you got started officiating before the elite level, was it ever an ambition of yours to actually go as far as you have gone?
Well, hi, Earl, and thanks for the welcome, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you guys tonight. As you know, I've met a few of you before around the world, pretty recently with Lyndon on a Futura 3 course, and David down in New Zealand as well. And I absolutely love spending time with like-minded people who love this sport, and show that love in the most difficult way possible by taking the whistle in a way that a lot of people would never choose to do. I mean, they would love to comment on what we do, but they don't have the courage to do it themselves. So for me, it's always special to speak to a group of people with the same mentality as me, regardless of where they are from the world. And I look back now, when I was listening to those words about the things that I was fortunate enough to do in my career, I look back now and think, my goodness, I mean, is that really me that Crescent was talking about? And it clearly was. But when I started out back in 1989 as an 18-year-old, because I wasn't as good a footballer as I would hope to be, and my father said to me at the age of 16, he said, Howard, he said, you're just not going to make it as a player. Have you thought about doing some refereeing? And to be honest, Earl, when I first thought about refereeing, when my dad suggested it to me, I said, I'm not really interested, Dad, because when I think about referees in my mind's eye, they're all bald old men, which is kind of like what I've become now some years later. But at the age of 16, I wasn't bald and I had some hair, and I thought, it might be nice to have some younger officials involved. And I decided, after a bit of persuasion from my dad, who's still alive and well, he's nearly 80, but he's still going. He's still president of the local Referees Association in England, in our town. And I decided to give it a go. And I took a 6-week course, a six-week course of tuition in the city of Sheffield, where I lived. And that course culminated on the 19th of December, 1989. And when I look back to that night, and I think back to that examination that I passed to become a ref, I suppose it was inevitable that somebody who was alive and well that night, living somewhere in the world, was going to go on to take charge of the World Cup final in 2010. That game was going to happen. We didn't know where or which teams would be involved, but we knew it was going to happen. And we knew that there would be a referee assigned to the game. And it turned out to be me, this failed footballer from the north of England who didn't want to be a referee, wanted to be I had ambitions to be a World Cup winning captain for England, not realising at the age of 6 or 7 how difficult that ambition would be to achieve being English, but that's what I wanted to be. And it turned out to be me. And amazing things happen to really ordinary people when you find a passion and things fall into place. And I've actually prepared a presentation, Earl, which, if I can share my screen, I'll go through some of the things that happened to me in my career, talk about some of the things that I think are important to be successful, and then we can take some more questions later on or as we go along. Does that sound?
Sure. I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Does that sound okay? Yeah. Let me share this screen. Oh, that's the end, so that's not good. Let me share this screen and that's still the end. Okay, let me go back to the beginning. 1 second, guys. 9 minutes with technology just lately. Okay, can you see that?
No, we still have you.
Okay, let me I know why. Let me share my screen. 1 second.
I made your co-host, Howard, so you should be able to share.
Ah, beautiful. Thanks. Now.
Yeah.
Okay, it's starting.
Is that working?
Yeah, that's working.
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. Excellent. Okay. So I'll go through this. There's a few videos in here as well, and a few things from my career. And hopefully, you'll find it interesting. And then we'll take some questions. But feel free to shout up at any time, guys, as we go along. And then if I'm going to share some videos, I'll optimize it so it runs smoothly, because I know it can sometimes buffer quite a bit as we go along. So this is me now. This is me only a few months ago, living in New York, heading up the professional referee organization that overseas refereeing in Major League Soccer. We also assigned to the United Soccer League, our second tier, and the National Women's Soccer League as well. And we employ 25 full-time referees. And I've been here since 2017. I came here initially to head up the implementation of VAR. And then I took over as general manager from 2018. So I'm now into my fourth year as general manager. And I love the job. I love being involved in the growth of the game in the US, and seeing how our referees are developing. Of course, we had to deal with the pandemic. That's me in the summertime wearing a mask, jogging along the River Hudson in New Jersey, which is where I live. My glasses kept steaming up all the time, so I decided to stop using glasses when I'm running. I guess the pandemic was always going to be something that we had to adapt to, and it's dangerous, of course. But for me, the bigger danger was being in the apartment all the time and the fridge. It's only just around the corner, and I ended up putting on quite a few pounds because living and working in the same space next to the kitchen was a bit of a temptation. So there you go. That's the biggest danger to me. So I work for Professional Referee Organisation now. We are funded by Major League Soccer and US Soccer, and we service primarily those three leagues. And it's a vehicle for professional refereeing in the United States, and we also employ some Canadians. What's been really pleasing has been the way that our officials have received global recognition. We've seen our officials receive a lot of high-profile assignments just in the time that I've been here. Mark Geiger, Jai Marufo, Joe Fletcher, all working at the 2018 World Cup together with some other officials as well. Corey Rockwell, Frank Anderson, getting a lot of assignments in that World Cup. And then also you'll see there on the right, you'll see Ishmael Elfath and his team at the Under-20 World Cup finals in Poland in 2019. So, we think our credibility is really growing. We think that people are recognizing that, our people can deliver good levels of officiating, not only in domestic competition, but in the global scene as well for CONCACAF and for FIFA. So I'm really, really proud of what we're seeing over here. Still lots of work to be done, of course. When I came to the US, I thought I need to adapt to US culture. So what can I do? I'm living here now, so I thought I'll become a New York Yankees fan in baseball. I didn't know anything about baseball, but I went to a couple of games. I got myself a Yankees hat, and I was pretty proud of my newfound love for the New York Yankees. And I went to work. We have an office in Manhattan where MLS is based, and I said to one of the guys in the office, I said, I've become a bit of a fan of the Yankees. And this American guy working in the office, he said, you do realize, Howard, he said that most Yankees fans actually know nothing about baseball, which is true for me. He said, to be honest, it's a bit like soccer. It's a bit like being a Manchester United fan in soccer, which is quite ironic, really, because most people think I am a Man United fan. This picture, it was posted by a player called Ryan Barble. Ryan Barble posted this picture after a game that I refereed between Manchester United and Liverpool, an FA Cup third round game in 2011. And a big game, big day in the football calendar, the FA Cup third round, two giants of the English game, Liverpool and Manchester United, playing at Old Trafford. And Kenny Dalglish had just come back to Liverpool as the manager, as the head coach for the second time in his career. So a lot of focus on this game. And in the first few seconds of the game, that's Ryan Barble, in the first few seconds of the game, after about 30 seconds, Dimitar Berbatov, playing for Man U, went down in the penalty area under pressure from Daniel Agger, the Liverpool defender. And one of the things that one of the big learning points from this situation for me was the need to always prepare properly for every game that you do. I was in a really good place back in 2011. I'd refereed the World Cup final that year, the Champions League final the year before. And me and my team, Darren Cam, Mike Malarkey, always working together. We were feeling pretty good about being able to deliver big games. And even though the World Cup was quite tough, I'll talk about that in a moment. But and I wonder if, looking back, I'd probably just become a little bit blasé, a little bit complacent, even on a big game like this. You need to be ready from that very first whistle. You need to be ready to make a big decision or to deal with a situation in those first few moments. And to be ready, you need to think about the game before you actually blow that whistle. You need to, think about the game from the moment that you get the assignment. Think about the challenges the game is going to present. You need to think about when you arrive at the stadium and you do your pre-game field inspection. You need to think not only about the surface, is it playable, but you need to think about the game, and you think about where you're going to be working. You're thinking about where you're going to be when big decisions need to be made. You need to put yourself into the game before it even starts. So that, because you're not like a player, you can't ease your way into the game. Sometimes you've got to make a big decision with the very first decision. And in this game, I blew the whistle. The game started. Berbatov got the ball, went into the penalty area and went down. And I found myself thinking, oh my goodness, what happened there? Which is not a good place to be. As a referee, you need to have really strong cognitive skills. So you're thinking ahead. You're thinking about the possibilities before they happen. What you don't want to be thinking is what happened there, because I ran it back through my mind. I thought, okay, he's hit the deck. He's under pressure. Yes, there's some contact. And yeah, it's a penalty. And I blew the whistle without going with a gut feeling, just working it out that it was a penalty because I was caught cold. I was caught by surprise. And you should never be caught by surprise. When I watched it back later, it was really a soft penalty. It was way too small in terms of contact to give a penalty. And I should have just waved it away and given a goal kick. As a football referee, you get instant feedback from the players. We all know that. And the feedback that I was getting from the Liverpool players that day suggested to me that I'd probably seen it a little bit too much. And it probably wasn't as clear a penalty as I'd worked out it was. Now, we've all been there. We all sometimes make decisions where you get that feeling straight away from the player reaction that it probably wasn't quite as straightforward as you thought. And the best thing when it's a penalty is for the penalty to be missed. But in this situation, the penalty was slotted home by, I think, Ryan Giggs on the day to make it 1-0. And I'd had a controversial start in this huge game that, I'd not really gone into in the right mindset, not gone into going through the same sort of proper processes, even working with my team all the time, Darren and Mike, my two assistants. We always, particularly learning from this, always went through the pre-match instructions in detail to make sure that we knew exactly what our role was, but also just to put us in the right mindset for the game. And I think probably in this game, we've not quite done that. Later on, 30 minutes in or 31 minutes in, with Liverpool 1-0 down to a controversial penalty, Steven Gerrard, the captain, committed a two-footed lunging tackle off the ground on Michael Carrick of Man U near the halfway line, and I knew it was a poor challenge, and I knew it was a red card challenge. I knew it was going to be unpopular because Liverpool were already down to this seemingly controversial penalty. I'm going to send off their captain, their best player, in the 32nd minute. People thought that I looked over to Alex Ferguson for confirmation it was red. That's not true. I made the decision based on what I got in my gut feeling. I knew it was a red card as well. So I sent him off, and Liverpool went down to 10 men. Now, one of the ways that we could tell how we were performing at half time on a big game that was televised is to look at where one of the cameramen went to at half time, because when the cameraman comes on, this guy with the steady cam on his shoulder, when he comes onto the field, his job is to zoom in on the most important participant so far. So we're hoping that's the goal scorer or the captain, or maybe if the goalkeeper's had a great game. When he goes past all of those players and he comes straight up to you as the ref and he shoves his camera into your face and follows you all the way off the field, you know that you've had a controversial half. You know it's probably not gone to plan. And this camera followed me all the way off the field into the corner at Old Trafford. And sure enough, there was quite a bit of controversy, as we know, with that first-minute penalty. And the game finished 1-0 to Liverpool. To Manchester United. There was no more scores, no more goals. And Liverpool were not happy with my performance. And hence the reason that Ryan Babel posted this picture on Twitter that night. We got some help to do it. Posted that picture of me. He was the first player ever to be fined for misuse of social media to criticise a ref. And ever since then, wherever I go now, even now, 6 years after my retirement, people still talk about, Manchester United have never been the same since they released Howard Webb. Manchester United have never replaced Howard Webb in their squad, that sort of thing, which is kind of crazy. They think my kids are called Cristiano, Rio, and Wayne, which is not the truth. It's funny, but I must, on a serious note, it probably did contribute to my decision to retire when I did, because I'd refereed almost 300 Premier League games by 2014. I'd refereed Manchester United 39 times in the Premier League. And across that period of time, you build up these histories of things. And, this reputation that I'd unwantedly acquired of being a Manchester United fan, which is not true, actually was on my mind. I was trying not to let it be, but I was going into games hoping there would be no controversy, hoping that nobody would be talking about me after the game, hoping that there'd be no situations presented to me which would exacerbate this sense. And that's not a good place to be, because you don't want to go into a game as a referee with these thoughts. You want to go in there clean in your head to be able to make decisions. Because people say that the best referees are the ones that you don't recognise, don't notice, and that's really true, but only if the game is the type of game where you can be that type of referee. Sometimes the game needs you to step up and make a big decision. You need sometimes to be a big actor on the field, play a big part by making a big decision. And if you get that call right, then you'll drop back into the background. If you go into a game hoping not to have to make a big decision, you end up not making the call that you need to make, and you end up becoming the story. So, yes, the best referees are the ones that you don't notice, but that's not really the truth. The truth is that the best referees are the ones that you see and hear when you need to see and hear them, when the game needs the referee to be seen and heard. They're the best referees. And I found also that sometimes going into games at times when I was close to selection for a big tournament, the European Championships or the World Cup, I would go in there sometimes hoping not to be the story, hoping the game would be straightforward, and ended up missing decisions because I was not wanting to make an error. Guys, you've got to be prepared to go out there and make a big call. If you only ever give decisions that you are certain of because you need high levels of evidence, then you're going to miss some big important decisions. You've got to trust your gut feeling. You've got to trust that feeling when something happens. You have to believe in yourself. If you prepare properly, if you're ready from that first minute, if you've got lots of experience from different situations as you've come through your development career, by the time you get to the top, your gut feeling is nearly always correct, and you should trust it. You should believe it, and you have to be prepared to make courageous calls. You have to be prepared to make big decisions, sometimes unpopular calls, and not want to always be in the background. So this is, what I certainly learned as I went through. I wasn't a Manchester United fan. I just want to absolutely make it clear. My team is this team, Rotherham United. And you'll recognise this guy, Sean Gota, who played over 200 games for my hometown club, Rotherham United. Plucked from the academy at Manchester United, scored, I think, over 70 or 80 or even 90 goals for the Millers, my team, my boyhood team. I'm still the ambassador of the football club at Rotherham. I watch every game. We're in the Championship near the bottom. And of course, Sean went on to greater and better things at Man City. But still very proud to be a fan of this particular club. And Sean helped to put us on the map a little bit with his goal scoring exploits, and one of the few international players that have graced the Rotherham United shirt. When I started out, I kind of looked something like that on the left. I mean, I'm about 23 years of age then. My hair had started to thin already. I do cast my mind back to that course back in 1989 when I passed my exam. And the thought that I would go on to take charge of a World Cup final is it's kind of unthinkable. I didn't set out with that ambition. I set out with the ambition of really going out there and enjoying my experience as a ref. Admittedly, as well, I did feel that I would be able to progress to a certain level, not knowing what that level would be. The very first game I ever did was about 3 weeks after passing my exam. I passed that exam on the 19th of December, 1989, at the end of this 6-week training course. I passed the written exam, was given a license to ref. I'd never blown a whistle in my life. It was a bit like being given a driving license, having never sat behind the wheel of a car. Here I was, never blown a whistle, but I'd got a license to ref. I went out, did a game in the new year of 1990, an under-10s game for kids. I didn't know what I was doing really, but I got about 6 or 7 handshakes from the parents. I thought, this is okay for a young lad to have responsibility. I'm quite enjoying this. And I thought, if I work long enough, hard enough, I can make it to a decent level. I did a lot of games. I chose to make myself available a lot of the time because I realized from quite an early age that the more games I did, the more I learnt about myself as a ref, the more I learnt from play reaction, the more I understood my role. I realized my gut feeling was getting stronger. I was able to manage people, communicate better with every experience because each time I was learning something a little bit new. I also learned that decisions are decisions and they're not always, black or white, or correct or incorrect. It's often about perception. It's often about the way that you sell that decision. I worked initially without linesmen, without assistant referees when I first started, and I realised that most of the time the problems that the situations that caused me problems were offside situations because I could make a foul call from pretty much anywhere, but to make an offside call, I had to be in a really credible position. So I spent most of the time running up and down in a wide position along one side of the field so that I could call the offsides. So that when the defence stuck their arm in the air for an offside, but I said play on, when they looked at my position, I was bang in line. And that told them that I was credible. So even if the decision wasn't right, they believed it. So understanding these little bits of advantage you can get, how you can get players to believe you. And even if you look at my kind of image change over the years from where I started to where I ended up just before I finished in 2014, I realized I needed to look more athletic. I needed to look like I belonged on the field, not because that wouldn't necessarily make my decisions better. My positioning and fitness would get better, and that would in turn lead to better decisions. But also, players would believe me. They would accept my decisions because I looked like I was an athlete on the field and deserved to be among them, if you like. And I think that helped as well. People said, "Oh, look, 6'2" and shaven headed. I'd rather have hair given a choice, but I didn't have that choice." It wasn't as though I could headbutt a player, if they didn't agree with me. Of course not. But it meant that I looked quite commanding on the field, and that helped, I think, in terms of the acceptance of my decision. So just thinking about how you can make a little bit of a difference to be more accepted, I think. The game is clearly getting faster and more challenging, and the world is more competitive. When football first started back in the late 1800s, it wasn't meant to be this important. It was meant to be a pastime. It was meant to be something that people could do in their spare time. And eventually, they realized that they would need a referee. At first, when the game first started, and David Ellery has told this story many times, the teams wouldn't have a referee. They would have maybe one umpire each. And then if the umpires couldn't agree, they didn't know what to do. So they had to have somebody to refer to. So they had a referee, somebody to refer to on the side of the field. And then after a while, they just put the referee onto the field. And that was the birth of the ref. But the referee, when you think back to those days, really had similar tools to the referee these days. Okay, we've got VAR now, but the referee had a whistle and they had their personality. And that's really the key instruments of refereeing now. We've got red and yellow cards as well, but the whistle and the personality are the key instruments that help you control the game as a ref. And now it's a different world. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry played with amazing athletes, and the referees have to be able to keep pace, played on wonderful surfaces with equipment that makes the ball go faster. And we need to really be able to keep pace. And what's required of a referee in 2021 is different to what was required in 2011 or 0.01. You know, the speed of the game is so much faster, and you need to be able to keep pace. You need to be able to get from one position in the field to make a big decision in one penalty area in the last minute of a demanding game, then get to the other end of the field to make an equally big decision at the other end in the last minute of a big game, without thinking about how you're going to get from A to B. You can't be thinking about the pain in your legs or your lungs. You've got to be thinking with all of your sort of like mental sort of like focus on the decision that you're about to make, where you're going to run, what decision you might need to make. Sometimes before the decision is even presented, you know, you've got to be thinking about, is it dog so? Is it dog so? Is it spar? No, it's dog so. No, it's spar. All the time that you're running at full speed, making a judgment on what's about to happen. So you have to be a true athlete. The speed of the game has gone through the roof. Some stats from MLS between 2014 and 2018 in terms of high speed running. These are in meters per game, 422 meters, high speed running in 2014 by the referee in MLS, rose to 689 in 2018. That's a 63% increase. Incredible, the increase that we're seeing in the physical demands being placed on our officials in the modern game. So we need to be able to keep pace. Now, when I speak to members of the public about referees, they don't necessarily consider that this current crop of referees in this day and age is better than the old generation, because they remember some of the characters from before. They remember how referees would manage the game with a bit of personality. They wouldn't necessarily protect the players in the way that referees protect players now. I can tell you for certain the current group of referees in 2020, 2021 is the best generation we've ever had. It has to be able to keep pace with the game. Yes, we've had some great referees in the past, but the current generation, a bit like the players, is better than the previous. I'm going to share with you a video that is from the 1990 World Cup. If you remember, for those who are old enough, the 1990 World Cup was played in Italy, and England made it through to the semi-finals. We lost to West Germany. That meant we were put into the third place game against Italy to see who would win the third place, the bronze medal. And in this game, which is an important game, a showpiece game at the end of a World Cup with the best officials working at the tournament, in this game, there was a goal disallowed for Italy just before half-time. Nicola Berti scored a looping header over Peter Shilton, and the goal was disallowed for offside. And Nicola Berti wasn't happy when he saw that the flag was raised. And you'll see why when I show you the video. But bear in mind, this was a World Cup tournament, a third place honours game, some of the best officials in the world. And if you look at the quality of the decision, you'll see how far we've come. And I'm going to just stop sharing for a second so I can maximise and optimise my share so you can see this in better quality. But just have a look at the quality of this decision.
Effettuata a beneficio di Bertoni, collaborazione di Bertoni Baggio, un lungo cross verso ancora e diventa trionfo. La partita si conclude con un gol di Berti che però viene annullato per fuorigioco. Annullato per fuorigioco il gol di Berti al termine di una delle azioni comunque più belle coralmente.
But Berti is onside by about 6 yards. Played on by 4 England defenders. And when you consider, just unoptimized now because it's better for the experience. When you consider that we are now grading offside decisions in terms of millimeters, and our guys are disappointed if they get one wrong by a really fine margin. In this situation, this assistant referee, this linesman, flagged Berti offside, even though Berti was 5 yards onside, played on by 4 defenders. That's because he wasn't a specialist. That's because he was a ref who'd been brought along to the tournament to referee and had been assigned as a linesman in the tournament. And he was watching the game like a ref. He was watching the playing of the ball. And by the time he turned his head to Berti, Berti had moved into an offside position, hence the reason the flag went up. That's why in 1992, we introduced specialist assistant referees, people like the people I worked with, Darren Cann and Mike Malarkey. The standards these days are higher than ever before. That video proves that. When you look at this picture, by the way, of Darren and Mike, these were the 2 assistants that worked with me at 2 World Cups and 1 Euros. This is a picture taken in Pretoria in South Africa, 2010. And this was during a field exercise where we had some players working with us, and the players would recreate an offside situation, like 2 players crossing over. The defence would step up, the ball would be played through, an attacker would run through, and the assistants had to make a judgment whether or not the attacker running through was off or onside at the moment the ball was played. And they would be in profile, one behind the other, and they had to make a judgment. Were they going to keep the flag down and continue with the attacker, or were they going to stop, raise the flag for offside? And this picture is remarkable because this is done at full speed. This is the moment that the crossover happens. Darren is behind Mike, and they're making the judgment in the moment. But if you look at the symmetry of their body positions, their flag position, their hand position, their feet, their heads, it's unbelievably beautiful, in my opinion, to see that level of precision in just a training exercise. And I'll tell you guys on the call, this is part of the reason why we were assigned to the final in 2010, because the FIFA committee members, the FIFA instructors could see that as a team, we were giving 100% to everything that we did. They could see how aligned we were as a team. They could see how reliable and accurate these assistants were, because at this tournament, there was quite a few errors that were made by assistant referees. If you think about Jorge Larionda doing England against Germany, when Frank Lampard hit the shot that went over the line behind Manuel Neuer, and the assistant didn't see it, appreciating he wasn't going to ever be in line, but he didn't see the ball was over the line. Equally, in the game between Argentina and Mexico, Carlos Tevez scored a goal, but was a long way offside, and the assistant from Italy didn't see it. That goal was allowed. That team from Italy, led by Roberto Rossetti, who's now head of refereeing for UEFA, they were sent home early, as was Larionda. So FIFA loved the fact that we got these assistants who were really, really skillful at what they did, giving 100%. And these sort of things make a difference. These things help you stand out. I was so grateful that my career coincided with that of Darren and Mike. And we have to understand that, these are not just assistants. We are all part of a team. We all work together. We understand our responsibilities. We, apart from the time at Liverpool Man U, we did proper pre-match instructions. We ensured that we knew our roles and responsibilities, because the modern game requires, a team effort to deliver a good performance. A few more things that I think are important to be successful. I think, first of all, I hope you realise that even at my age, almost 50 now, I'm passionate about this game. I was passionate when I was a kid. I was passionate when I started refereeing, and I still hold that passion, whether it be a passion for my club, Rotherham United, in the Championship, a passion for you guys as a group of this refereeing, as a member of this refereeing family, the officials I work with in MLS. I'm passionate about the sport. I'm passionate about people as well. I think if you don't have passion for what you do, then you don't really excel. You don't achieve, your full potential. Those people who go to school in the morning just dragging their feet, or go to work and they're always just wanting to get through the day to go home, they're going to do just enough, but not excel. And if you want to get to the top, you need to excel. You need to have that passion that helps you get through the tough times as well, because one of the things you've got to be prepared to do is persevere. I'll talk about that in a moment. You've also got to think about where that passion is going to take you. I called it vision, but it's like understanding, going back to Earl's question at the very start, understanding where you think this journey can take you and what are you prepared to sacrifice to get there, because it's a competitive world. So are you prepared to do the hard yards? Are you prepared to do the things on the training field or in the classroom or in your spare time where, you are setting yourself a little bit apart from your colleagues who are striving to get the same promotion or the same games that you're hoping to get to? Because there's only a finite number of promotion spots or FIFA spots or, assignments in tournaments or finals. And it's not about the will to win. It's not about having the will to win, because everybody's got the will to win. Everybody wants to be successful. Nobody on this call wants to be a failure ever. People want to be winners. But it's not about the will to win. It's about the will to prepare to win. The will to do those hard yards that are not always that enjoyable. Picking up the law book and reading the laws of the game again, understanding them so they're at your fingertips when you need them in the most stressful times in the game. When you need to be able to draw upon that resource that's in your head of knowing the laws of the game so clearly. And every time you do a fitness session, or you read the laws of the game, or you watch a video of a game, or you speak to a colleague, or you attend a session like this, each time as a referee, you're kind of investing into your personal bank. And sometimes in a game, you have to draw out of that bank. You have to take some things out because the game's tough. And you need to make sure that your bank account is big enough to be able to do that and not be left overdrawn, because that's when you lose the game and lose control. So think about what you're prepared to do. How far can you go? How far are you prepared to sacrifice time? You might not want to. You might be okay doing what you're doing. But if you want to get to the very top, you've got to be prepared to do those things. And then keeping self-belief. One of the most important things as a ref to be successful is having self-belief, having confidence in your own ability without being arrogant. Arrogance is not an attractive trait in any walk of life, in my opinion, and not in a referee either. You have to have some ego, but not an arrogance. And of course, one of the things that players do all the time to referees, they try to get them to make mistakes. Players will try to make you make a mistake. The ball will hit a player, it will go out for a corner. They'll appeal for the goal kick, knowing full well it should be a corner. So they're trying to make you make a mistake to do a goal kick. And then when you do make a mistake, the players go crazy at you. So it's kind of a weird world, isn't it? That's why self-belief is so important. It has to run through the referee, right through the core of the referee. We did some research when I was in the Premier League about what personal attributes are most important to be a successful elite level ref. And resilience, mental toughness, self-belief was the thing that came out of everything. Absolutely. Having that confidence. And it's tough because sometimes your confidence gets knocked, of course, when you have tough games. Resilience, perseverance is so important, because that journey from when you first start to where you're hoping to get to will not be a straight line of success. It'll go up and down like a roller coaster. My journey from that examination in 1989 to reaching the World Cup final in 2010 wasn't a straight line of success. It was a roller coaster, up and down. And the important thing is that you've got the resilience to be able to deal with those moments when you're feeling down. And they're going to come. They're going to come to everybody. You know, at least 10 times in my career, I came home from a game that was difficult. I'd thrown my kit bag into the corner of the kitchen, thinking, that's it. I've had enough. I'm packing in. There's easier things to do on a Saturday or a Sunday than this. And when I threw my bag in the corner, I intended to leave it there. But you know, my dad would call me and say, how's the game going? I'd say, it's not going well. We'd talk about it. He'd say, come on, you're better than that. And because I'm passionate about the game, and because I've got, you know, the willingness to sacrifice things to get to the top, and because I've got confidence in my own ability without arrogance, I went back and I picked my bag back up each time when the disappointment of the bad game had settled down. And I've cleaned my boots and I've gone out and done it again the next week. And usually the next game went well. And when I stood in the tunnel in Johannesburg in South Africa on the night of the 11th of July 2010, about to take charge of the World Cup final between Spain and the Netherlands, I was so glad that I'd gone back and picked my bag up each time that I'd thrown it into the kitchen corner, intending to leave it there at the time. But I was so glad I'd gone back and picked it up each time, because if I'd have left it there just one of those 10 times and not gone back for it, I'd have been watching the game at home on TV instead of achieving this unbelievable ambition, I guess, of refereeing a World Cup final. So expect disappointments, expect knockbacks, expect there to be tough times, expect there to be times where you're not seeing the game quite so clearly, where you're fighting over decisions, and you have those runs of form where sometimes you see the ball like a beach ball. Every decision is really easy. And then there's other times where you see it like a little pea and it's difficult to make a call. And you just have to keep going. You have to keep going and, you know, talk to colleagues who are well-minded, well-meaning, wanting to support you. You know, look at some videos, talk about it. Keep going. You'll come through those spells. And the further on you go in your career, the less deep those troughs are. Also, expect to have some difficult games. Expect to have games that are really tough. The most difficult game I ever had in my professional career, okay, the World Cup final was right up there, but the more difficult game was one between Everton and Bolton Wanderers in the Premier League in 2004. And I was quite a young referee, quite inexperienced. I think it was about my 13th Premier League game, unlucky for some, and it was a game that had two teams with a lot of experienced players who were prepared to make the game tough for me as a rookie ref. It was played at Goodison Park, the home of Everton, the most, in my opinion, hostile environment in the Premier League, with fans who were very partisan. And, every time you give a decision against their team, they were negative in terms of their reaction, which sometimes bled onto the field. And this game was a challenging one. And for the first 20 minutes, I was given the calls as I saw them, giving the decisions that I thought I needed to give. And I was giving decisions to Bolton as I felt I needed to do. And that was creating a reaction from the crowd, and that was coming onto the field, and the Everton players were making it difficult. And it was a tough environment. There was a lot of physicality in the game. And I did something that you should never do as a ref. After about 25 minutes, I started, because every time I was blowing the whistle, I was getting a negative reaction. I started to blow the whistle less. I started to let the game go when I should have been stamping my authority on the game. In other words, I started to hide. And it has completely the opposite effect to what you're trying to have, because by not doing the job, the tempo goes higher and higher, and the game gets harder and harder. And the captain of Bolton that day was a guy called Gary Speed, who was also the captain of Wales, who came up to me after about 40 minutes, and he said, "Ref," he said, you're starting to let us down. You're letting us down. And I said, "Gary, nonsense." But he was absolutely right. I wasn't doing the job that I was sent there to do, i.e. referee the game. And what I should have done is believed in myself and stayed true to the line that I thought was the right line. Because when I watched the game back later, it ended up being a really tough game, a really difficult game. It just went away from me. I lost control of the game. That week, I looked back on the game with my coach. We went through every moment of the game. It took about 3 hours. And, for the first 20 minutes or so, I did okay. Wasn't perfect. But if I had just believed in myself, I'd have come out at the end of 90 minutes in much better shape than I actually did. So trust me, when you're in those difficult games, keep doing the job you've been sent there to do. Don't start to hide. Don't start to swallow the whistle, because when you're blowing the whistle, you're getting a reaction. Keep doing the job. Be resilient. Persevere. You'll have those games. Don't panic. Just keep doing the job you've sent there to do. Don't hide. And then the last thing is courage. Just being a ref is courageous. Being prepared to take charge of 22 players, sometimes with spectators in the stadium, on TV, takes courage. It takes courage to do it when other people are prepared to criticise but don't have the courage to do it themselves. And, again, going back to that night in Johannesburg, when I stood in the tunnel, there were easier places to be. There were easier places to be that night. Being on the sofa at home would have been easier. But it wouldn't have given me the opportunity to go out and referee the World Cup final. And it was a thing that needed courage, of course. But you've got to have the courage to put your dreams above the fears of any failure that you might think could come along. So having the courage to put your dreams above fears of failure is really important. So passion, vision, self-belief, resilience, and courage, I think, are really, really important for people who want to make it to the top in this difficult job that we've chosen to do. I'm going to try and pull this together a little bit by just sharing a couple of clips or a couple of situations from games that I was involved in my career. And I'm not showing them to say, "Oh, look how great I was," because quite often, the situations I talk about aren't the things that go smoothly. But because I was there, I can tell you what I was thinking. I can tell you what was going through my mind. And I want to jump right to the very last game that I did as a professional ref. 2014, the World Cup in Brazil, round of 16, Brazil against Chile in Belo Horizonte, the first knockout game of the tournament. And I'd already decided that I was going to retire at the end of the World Cup in 2014. I'd been a referee on the Premier League for 11 years. I've been on FIFA for 10 years. And I was 43 years of age. I knew that the age limit was possibly going to go, but at the time it still existed. I didn't really want to go to the next Euros in 2016. This was my 9th tournament, my 4th major tournament, with 2 World Cups and 2 Euros. And I was ready to move on to the next stage of my life, and decided and told Mike Riley from the PGMOL in England that I was going to retire after the World Cup. So I knew this was my last game, or potentially my last game. I didn't think I'd get another game in the tournament. And what a great way to go out. This is the Brazil national team in a Brazil World Cup against one of their arch rivals from Chile. And the eyes of the world were on this game. Now, even though you try not to read what's being said on social media, trust me, as a referee, you don't want to go looking at Twitter to try to build your confidence levels. Sometimes you can't help but hear what's being said, because people will sometimes text you messages, friends will text you things inadvertently that they don't realize is not helpful. So before this game, I got a text message from a friend saying, I can't believe what the coach of Chile is saying. He's saying that the only way that Chile can win this game is if the referee is strong enough to stand up to Brazil in the Brazilian World Cup. And Phil Scolari, the coach of Brazil, had responded apparently by saying, this is a big insult. We are Brazil. We don't need the referee to play for us. We can win the game anyway. And all these things are going off, but there's a clearly mind games being played. So again, you've got to keep your self-belief and your resilience, and you've got to be prepared to make a big decision. In the very first minute of the game, Fernandinho, number 5 there, commits a late challenge on Aranguiz of Chile. And the opening few moments of the game, I already talked about being ready, being prepared for whatever the game might throw at you. Your decision-making in those early stages of the game is really important, because it's going to set the benchmark. You've got limited tools that you can use. I talked earlier about your personality, your yellow card, red card, your whistle. That's kind of all you've got, really, that you've got to manage the game with. And the use of the yellow card is a really important tool. And the timing of when you choose to show that yellow card is really important as well. It never failed to amaze me how a well-timed yellow card could absolutely grab the game by the balls for you. But a mistimed yellow card could equally cause the yellow card to have no impact. It's a scary feeling, by the way, when the yellow card is not having any impact. It can also cause you to lose control of the game. And one of the key things the referee has to do is show balance and fairness, because a lot of the time, confrontation, dissent, aggravation to the official comes from a sense of injustice. For anybody who's got kids at home, if you've got more than one kid, more than one child, you'll know that, they'll say it's not fair. Why is he or she getting something I'm not? Players are like that. Players want to see that they're being treated fairly. So when this tackle goes in from Fernandinho, I know it's close to a yellow card. I know that it's forceful, it's bordering reckless. And I'm also, even though I'm trying not to think about what's being said before, I'm also mindful that the Chileans are kind of expecting the home team to get the advantage of any benefit of the doubt. I'm also mindful that if I pull the yellow card out too early for something that's too low, I'm setting the benchmark at a place that I then have to be consistent with going through the game. I also know that if I don't caution Fernandinho, and the next tackle is from a Chilean player, which is just marginally worse, and I have to caution, that will absolutely confirm in their mind that I am favouring the home team. So if I'm going to give Fernandinho the benefit of the doubt, I need to know that there is margin for a Chilean player to commit an offence a few minutes later, which is slightly worse, but still within that boundary within that range for management. Otherwise, I lose the faith of the away team here, because they will feel that I'm not being fair. So if you're not going to caution for a foul early on, you need to make sure that there's enough room for the next foul to be slightly worse and still be able to manage. If it's clearly worse, that's a different story. But if it's close to the line, if it's close to being that place where there's no room for management, I would suggest you caution on a challenge like this. I say to our referees all the time, don't make yourself the villain. If a player does something stupid, regardless of the time of the game, he's the person who takes that on his responsibility on the shoulders. Don't take it off him and put it onto yours. If somebody deserves a second yellow card, show him the second yellow card. Don't take that stupidity from the player and put it on your shoulders. If that player gets sent off and it's clear, the player is the person who is responsible for his actions, not you. So on this one, I had to weigh up all of those things. The foul was it was a strong foul, but it wasn't at that level where I had to caution. And I felt there was enough room to be able to manage, and I did. And then a few minutes later, Gary Medel, the number 17, committed a late foul on Neymar, and it was probably slightly worse than Fernandinho's, but it wasn't clearly worse. It was one that I still had the room to manage. And there I was after 5 minutes, 2 warnings, 1 for each team, and we knew where the line was. People knew now that, yes, this referee has shown some empathy for the game. He's picked out these situations where he can manage. And now we know the next one is going to be a yellow card, and sure enough, it was. So that early stage is really important in terms of deciding whether you're going to show that yellow card or not. Don't leave yourself exposed to too much risk, because if you do, then you're going to end up putting the team that you caution against you because of the sense of injustice. Later on in the game, with the score at 1-1 in the second half, there was a really big situation. We'd been taught throughout this tournament, or instructed throughout this tournament, that we always had to think about the next step. Always think about the next phase of play. Don't be caught ball watching. Don't be a spectator. Think like a number 10. Think about where the play is going to go next. And we did pretty well. I did pretty well, always moving into the next phase, always, optimizing my position by moving early, not staring and focusing on the ball. But in the 51st minute, I got caught ball watching. Marcelo is on the ball, and I'm going to hang around for too long and not move quickly enough to make the next decision, because what Marcelo does is ping a ball 27 yards, a diagonal ball, to Hulk, the centre forward for Brazil. And Hulk is going to control it. Don't know quite how, but he's going to control it, and the ball is going to drop to his foot. And I'm watching, instead of being 5 yards away from the ball, like I am in the picture there, I'm suddenly going to be 27 yards away without a view of how Hulk is controlling the ball. But the way the ball drops tells my gut that he can't have chested it. The way it's come down tells me it must have hit a right angle. He must have used his arm to bring the ball down. It drops to his foot. I'm thinking this is handball, although I've not really seen it. I look over to Mike Malarkey, my assistant, who's much closer than I am, thinking Mike's a really good lad. He's going to flag this handball. Mike doesn't. He keeps his flag down. I think, oh, my goodness. So suddenly my 90% certainty has gone down to 80% because my assistant hasn't seen it as handball. So I'm thinking, okay, let's see what happens. Hulk is not the greatest centre forward for the Brazilian national team of all time. He'll probably put it wide. He doesn't. He hits it, and it bobbles into the bottom corner past Claudio Bravo to make the score 2-1, or so Brazil think. I'm still thinking, this is really not feeling good. This feels like a handball. It feels like he's handled it. I even look at Hulk to see if he looks at me before he celebrates, because sometimes players will. If they know they're guilty, they'll look at me before they celebrate, but they'll look at the ref. But he doesn't. He continues to celebrate. And it seemed to take about 10 seconds. It didn't. But I'm thinking, okay, do I give handball and follow my gut feeling, which I've learned to follow over many years, and it's a really good guide, or do I give a goal and potentially regret not following the gut feeling? As I'm weighing it up, 2 or 3 Chilean players instinctively, without time to consult, and with real vigour, run towards me, appealing for handball. And that was the bit of extra sort of incentive, or impetus, should I say, for me to really trust my gut feeling, because I thought, yes, I'm not the only person in this stadium who thinks this is a handball. And my gut feeling with their natural reaction was enough to give me the confidence to give the handball decision and disallow the goal. And Hulk looked at me and waved his arm when he saw that I was disallowing the goal, not too vociferously, but I'm still a little bit doubtful, because I've not seen enough evidence with my own eyes, but I'm following my gut feeling, my knowledge of the game. I'm thinking I'm probably right, but I'm not 100% certain. Then Fred, the other centre forward, having disallowed the goal, he came up to me, he said, handball, handball? I said, yes, handball. And he winked at me. He winked, and I thought, that's a good sign. I said to Darren and Mike on the radio, I think we're going to be okay. I think it's handball. But there's still that little bit of doubt in my mind. And the game ended up 1-1. It went to extra time. It stayed 1-1. It went to penalty kicks. Brazil won the game on penalty kicks. I don't care who wins the game, but I guess it made my passage in life a little bit easier, the fact that it went through. As I came off the field, their coach, Phil Scolari, came up to me and said, Webb, you're the best. I thought, yeah, if you'd have lost the game, you might have felt differently. But I came off the field and I went down the steps, down the tunnel. I was met by the head of the Brazilian Football Federation media department, who looked at me and he just said 3 words. He said, "Can you imagine? Can you imagine?" I worked out between him saying that and by the time I got to my locker room, I'd worked out that "can you imagine" means, can you imagine if we'd not gone through in this game, in the World Cup in Brazil, because you've disallowed a perfectly good goal? Can you imagine the world of pain that you would be facing? I'd worked it out, and that's what he meant. By which time I'm thinking, oh my goodness, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I got it wrong. And I did what I always do, what referees do all the time. I'm telling you, on a live TV game, they go to the locker room, they get their cell phone, their mobile phone out of their pocket in the locker room, and they put the PIN number in to open up the messages. And you know that when the game has gone well, you've got lots and lots of messages from people saying, congratulations, great game. And when it's gone badly, you've only ever got one from your mom saying, I still love you. And I've got the phone out and I'm looking for the messages, and message after message came through, which was a good sign. I opened the first one and it said, congratulations, Howard, really good performance, and what a great decision to disallow the goal by your assistant referee, Mike Malarkey. And it wasn't by Mike, it was by me. It would have been his if it had been wrong. But it was a correct decision, thankfully, and it taught me again about following my gut feeling. And I'm going to share the video now, because, and then you can make your own mind up whether it was the right call to disallow this goal.
David Luiz gets away with that. Marcelo lays it in. Here's Hulk, who rolls it in. But I think he used his hands here. I don't think this is going to count. It's not. Well, the celebrations all around the stadium, but they're going to be brought to a halt here because Hulk just used his hands to control it, and the referee from a distance saw that. So Hulk gets a yellow card instead of a pat on the back. Have a look at this again. Ooh, did he? Did he?
Of course he did. Clear as day. I'll just come out of the screen share. So that was the last ever big decision I made, based out of gut reaction, gut feeling, which is something you should follow in my experience, and it was a correct call, and that was the end of my active career. I'm just going to touch upon the World Cup 2010 because it's kind of what defines my career, really. We went down to South Africa, not the most experienced team at the World Cup, but on the back of a good season. We'd done the Champions League 10 days before we flew to South Africa. I'll talk about the Champions League in a moment, but we went down there, had a great team with me. We'd had a good season in the Premier League as well, and looking forward to being involved in the World Cup in South Africa. We're not expecting to get to the later stages, but we started really well. We did a game between Spain and Switzerland, which went smoothly in Durban. Then we did a game between Italy and Croatia. Italy and Slovakia, which went really well. We did a knockout game between Brazil and Chile, same two teams that you've just seen, but 4 years earlier, and Brazil won that one 3-0. So, the games have gone well. The two assistants have been performing exceptionally well, and we thought, with some of the things that were happening with some of the more senior referee teams, like the ones I've mentioned, like Rossetti and Larionda, who were great referees, but were having issues around some particular decisions that had been made or not made. We could see a path opening up that we could get to the later stages. The game that I've mentioned, the game between Brazil and Chile in 2010, not the 2014 version, but the one in 2010 South Africa, was the first time that I'd been assigned to referee two South American teams. And we all know that football has a slightly different culture in different parts of the world. So in Bermuda, it will be played slightly differently to the way that it's played in Australia. I mean, of course, we all know it's played slightly differently. The English game is different to the Spanish game. And I wanted to prepare for that game in the best way that I could. One of our instructors in the referee camp in 2010 in South Africa was this guy with the red shirt on, Horatio Elizondo, who'd refereed the final 4 years earlier in Germany, sent off Zidane for headbutting Marco Materazzi, in Berlin, and he's from Argentina. So I said to Horatio, look, can we spend some time talking about South American football culture, about the way the players will respond to me, the body language to use. So we spent a really nice half an hour to an hour talking about the best type of tactic to use, maintaining eye contact and that type of thing, and not speaking too much as an English-British referee. We do talk quite a bit, but picking our times to do that, and what have you, using strong body language. And the game went really well. It went really well. It was the game that kind of like convinced FIFA that, me and my team were suitable candidates for the final. And the day after the game, I spoke to Horatio in the hotel, and I said, thank you for the advice. Appreciate it. The game went well. He said, yeah, I saw the game. I was really happy. He said, I've got one more piece of advice for you, should you get another game. He said, when you show a yellow card, he said, you're showing it like this. And I don't know if you got on my webcam, you can see I'm holding it in front of my face. He said, you're showing it in front of your face. He said, when you show a yellow card, he said, the piece of yellow plastic is to communicate to the world, to the fans, to the other players, to the TV audience, that this player is being cautioned. But when you caution a player, it's your eyes that send the message to the player that this is the line. So show your yellow card like this off to the side and maintain eye contact. And that was really great advice, because in my next game in the final, I had 14 opportunities to practice that technique, because I was suddenly faced with the hardest ever, the hardest game since that one in Everton, shall we say, at least, on the biggest stage possible. People said to me this game between Spain and the Netherlands would be a beautiful thing. Two teams who know how to play the game beautifully. I thought, well, maybe, but, games of this importance often aren't. It turned out to be really, really physical. It turned out to be a game where, the yellow card wasn't having the effect it should have had. Even though the tactics I've talked about early management of the game, timing of the yellow cards, all that worked out okay, actually. When I look back on the game later, my early interventions were pretty standard, really. I didn't miss much in those early stages. I got quite fatigued by the end because there was so much being presented to me to deal with. There was one moment which stands out, one moment in the game which stands out, which is this one. This one where Nigel de Jong put his studs into the chest of Alonso, which is clearly a red card offence. If we've got VAR, this would have been a 10-second check at the screen to send off de Jong. But we didn't have VAR. Thinking back to going into these games without VAR is quite an interesting concept. We were going in just based with the information that we had, 4 officials, based on the full-time view that they have. I was kind of behind Alonso, looking over his shoulder. A couple of things to say. I didn't expect this type of challenge. I don't think I've ever seen a challenge like this in all of my career. I didn't really see the point of contact. De Jong's leg collapses really quickly. So yes, on a freeze frame, it's really obvious that his studs were in the chest and his leg was locked, but it bent really quickly. So the players came together very quickly. I knew it was a late contact. I knew that the foot was raised, but I didn't appreciate the studs were in the chest, obviously. And the ball was headed by Alonso to David Villa. David Villa was through in a really good position. I anticipated potentially playing advantage, but decided the contact was too heavy. Blew the whistle and showed the yellow card. The Spanish players reacted. 1 or 2 reacted because of the nature of the tackle, but most of them reacted because they wanted advantage. The difficulty with that as well is that my assistant, Darren, who I've got so much respect for, is a great official, not only an assistant, but really good foul reader as well. He was looking at the offside. Mike Malarkey was miles away. The 4th official was some distance away. That was Yuichi Nishimura from Japan. So between us, we didn't get it. We should have done, of course. Officials at this level should not miss this type of situation. And I regret this for the rest of my life, that I didn't call this correctly at the time. And people look and say, how could you not? Did you bottle the red card because it was the World Cup final? Did FIFA tell you not to send off because it was the World Cup final? And none of those things are true. I just didn't have the certainty. I didn't have the gut feeling, to be honest. If I had a strong gut feeling, yeah, World Cup final, it needs to be a strong gut feeling. It does, because you're changing the game after 25 minutes. But if it had been strong enough, I would have sent him off. But I didn't have that either. To me, it was a late, strong contact. Yellow card seemed like the normal, natural outcome. And when I watched it back later, yes, of course, I was horrified by what I saw. And this is the moment that will live with me forever. But it wasn't only that moment. The game presented lots of other challenges as well. And I'm going to share some video from the half-time dressing room, the half-time locker room. FIFA were making a documentary about the final with following various parties, various people that were involved in the final. And they were following us. I'd forgotten that the camera crew was going to be in the half-time locker room. They told us beforehand, but I'd forgotten about it. I wasn't interested in making a good documentary at this stage. I was only interested in refereeing the game. And I actually only realised later, some days later, that there was footage of what happened in the half-time locker room. And I think this is really good because you can see the stress that's on my face because it had been a really tough, challenging game. Even for me at my stage of my career, I was fighting to keep control even by half-time. And I did maintain my line. I didn't do what I did at Everton and start to hide. That's why we ended up with lots of cards, including a red card later on. But it was stretching me. The game was really challenging. And you'll hear what I say, which is about just do your job, which is really true. And it goes back to what I talked about earlier about keeping your line. I'm going to just share it again with an optimized video because I want you to see this. And you'll see this is the inside of the locker room at halftime of the World Cup final. I know it's not for you lot, but that's tough first half. Tough first half. I don't think I've anywhere to go, There's anywhere to go with it. So I do keep doing the job.
Just confirm the detail I've got.
Yep.
Orange 9,
Yep.
6,
Yep.
and 8.
Yes.
Blue 5 and 15.
I've names for them as well.
Yeah, it's Van Persie,
Yeah.
Van Bommel,
Yeah.
De Jong,
Yeah.
Puyol,
Well,
and Ramos.
good, yeah. Yes. Good, yeah. It's not physically, it's not difficult, it's more difficult mentally. It's not beautiful, is it? It's not beautiful. Oh, we just got to do our job. Just do our job. And I really meant that. At the end, you'll hear me say, just do your job, do your job. I'll just screen share again. I'll come off this one because I know it affects the quality of the clips. Yeah, at the very end of that, I actually say, just do your job, and I absolutely meant that. Just stick in there. And we came through in the end okay. It wasn't perfect. It was a tough game. The best team won it. Spain won the game in the end with Iniesta scoring, of course. And it left a bit of a sour taste because the game had been so challenging, so physical. We weren't perfect. But all of those things I've learnt about coming through my career, about maintaining self-belief and following the line when the game's tough, all came into fruition in that game in Johannesburg. Just a little final story just to share with you. Now I'm just going to talk at the very end about a little bit about VAR. 50 days before the World Cup final, I took charge of the Champions League final between Inter Milan from Italy and Bayern Munich from Germany. This was probably, looking back, the highlight of my career. This was the most enjoyable evening of my entire refereeing career. The game was played between two giants of European football, the biggest club competition in the world, the best stadium in the world, in my opinion, the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium in Madrid. 80,000 people there that night, full house, played on a Saturday night for the first time. Previously, the Champions League had been played on a Wednesday night. And I was honoured and privileged to be involved in this game. For the last 5 years before this, English teams had always made the final. So this was the first time that a Premier League team had not made the final, hence the reason that I was eligible to be assigned. So a real honour, real responsibility. A little story just before the game started, actually, that I'll just share with you. So in the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium in Madrid, the locker rooms are they're in this stand where this picture's taken. They're quite high up in the stand. So when you come out of the locker room, you have to go down 23 steps and then you walk out onto where that red carpet is to go onto the field. So this game is going to kick off at 8:45 at European time. So at 8:25, we have to leave the locker room because there's a few things are going to happen before the game starts. So we need to give a bit more time. So 8:25, the guy from UEFA said, okay, ring the bell so the players can come out. So I rang the bell, came out of my locker room onto this kind of landing area on top of these 23 stairs. And from the door to my left came out the red and white players from Bayern Munich, and from the door to my right came the black and blue striped players from Inter Milan. And then from another door onto this landing, out came these 23 little kids, aged about 6 or 7 or 8. And 11 of these kids are wearing Bayern Munich kit, and 11 are wearing Inter Milan kit. And these kids look really happy. These are the player escorts. It's the moment of their life. And there was one little kid, the 23rd little kid, looking really fed up, wearing a referee's kit. And he's the referee escort. He wasn't happy, I could tell. I thought that's a really short straw. And then when I looked further, there was 2 more kids. And these are dressed as assistant referees. These are assistant referee escorts. I thought that's an even shorter straw. But I held the hand and we walked down these steps and came out onto that red carpet there that you can see in the picture. And I walked towards the little podium, the black thing that you can see there. And as I walked towards it, there was nothing on it. And then from within, automatically, up came, as I walked towards it, up came the European Cup, the big silver trophy, the big ears that I've seen lifted by so many giants of world football. And I can see my face reflected in the cup wearing a referee's kit. Unbelievable things happen to ordinary people like me who started refereeing because he wasn't that good a player, encouraged by his dad, but had a passion for the game, could see where that passion could take him, learned how to keep his self-belief, was resilient when it didn't go well, and had the courage to go for it, really. And all of those things came together. And that was the moment of my career. And I was emotional at the end. At the end of the game, it had gone well. You know, don't you know when a game's in your pocket? I would say that anybody who gets a final, anybody who has a big game, try at some point in the game, just try to take a moment to appreciate what you're doing and what you've done. And there was a player injured after about 80 minutes, and the doctor came on to treat the player. And I had a chance to look around and absorb the moment and to think what I was involved in was pretty amazing. And at the end of that game, I had quite a strong physical, not physical in terms of the challenges, but, physical in terms of the distance I had to cover at high speed. Even though I'd done 90 minutes of high intensity football, I bounced up the steps to get my trophy, my medal from, it was Michel Platini. I bounced up the steps to get my medal, full of energy because I was so excited about being involved in something like this. And this was a real highlight of my career. Having retired and come over to the US, I'm heavily involved in video review. I just want to very quickly touch on it. It's still topical, even though it's getting, pretty established now. But, seeing the way it's received in the Premier League, which is obviously was my league for a long time, and seeing the challenges that people are facing, I'm a big believer in it. I'm a believer in video review. I believe in VAR. I think any referee who goes into a big game and you said to them the night before the game, you've got VAR to be with you tomorrow in your big game, your Champions League final, your World Cup final. If you want, we can take it away. I don't think any referee would take it away. I think they all enjoy the fact that it's there, at least as a safety net. The moment that changed my view about this was when Thierry Henry handled the ball, when he handled it against Ireland. And the game was being refereed by a good friend of mine called Martin Hansson from Sweden, who had a great game up to that point and couldn't see this handball, couldn't see the handball by Henry. And the ball was controlled twice by the hand on the blind side of the officials. And Henry crossed it to William Gallas, who scored. And that put France through to the finals in 2010 in South Africa. It knocked Ireland out, but also it knocked Martin Hansson out as well, because he didn't referee a game in South Africa, even though he was one of the most respected and successful referees at that time in the world. And I can remember I had a conversation with David Elleray the next day from the FA saying, David, we need some support. We need some help. We can't continue being exposed to errors like this when people at home have got the information within a few seconds. Me and my lad, my son Jack, was watching this, and within a few seconds we could see it was handball, but the most important person couldn't. And I was a big advocate from that moment. As long as he can introduce it without changing the basic way the game is played, the flow and the tempo, it's successful, but it has to sit behind the scenes. It has to be there for the really clear things, not the subjective things. And the challenge is recognizing what's clear and what is subjective. So we say to our people all the time, look, when you see a decision, let the referee decision stand unless there is no considerations to support the decision. And if you can find no reason to support the decision, recommend a review. So we did a lot of training, because when we first came together in 2017 in MLS, there was a wide range among the officials of what was and wasn't clear and obviously wrong. We said, listen, don't think to yourself, is the decision right? Think, is it clearly wrong? There's a difference. And to get there, we created a big training camp in Utah with cameras that came along and set up like a proper production where we could do lots of training. And VAR training is really simple, because you don't need the players to do anything. You just need the referee to make a silly call on the field. You know, a player headed the ball out, the referee gives a penalty for handball. You're giving the VAR some training. And we did a lot of training, and we managed expectations, and we told the clubs, don't expect us to get everything right. You know, you'll still disagree with some decisions, but what you can expect is that we won't allow clear errors to stand. A goal won't be scored with a hand. We'll not have goals that are clearly offside. So, you know, we'll cut out a whole host of errors, and we'll make the game better. But we'll not be stopping it every 2 minutes. We'll not be going to the screen 5 times in a match, hopefully. And those are the sort of things. And then we went live in August 2017, and the very first weekend, we had a situation which really worked in our favour, because it showed exactly what VAR is about. And even those people who didn't believe in it looked at this and said, yeah, we can see why it works well. And I'll just share a situation from that first weekend that convinced people that this was the right thing to do. And this is a game, Portland against LA Galaxy. The referee is Drew Fisher from Canada, FIFA referee. And a goal is going to be scored by LA Galaxy, which doesn't really create much reaction from anybody. And the goal is awarded by the ref. And then I'll show you what happened with the VAR.
Joss on the ball. And fill it in left-footed. Goes far post towards Jones. They were taken back into the mix up for grabs. Oh, it's Zardes who stabs it in. Giassi Zardes has ended his long goal drought, his first of the season. And what did you say, Taylor? The Achilles heel bites the timbers again. Another set-piece goal conceded.
Well, in defending set pieces comes in 2 phases. One, you deal with the first ball, but then it's the second ball. And time again, when we're here at Providence Park, it's this phase right here that kills the Portland Timbers. You can't get caught flat-footed. Jake Gleason's slow to react coming off his line. And Ziggy...
So not much reaction from anybody. The commentators are okay with the goal. The goal gets checked, like all goals get checked. And we'll have a look at what the VAR looked at.
Okay, this is potential outside here. Okay, that's clean.
It's talking about handball here. So I've got another angle
Okay.
to bottom right.
I need to look straight in on this one.
Drew, hold. Can you hold
This one a bit. We're just taking a quick peek at it.
The best angle is that bottom right on that.
That's his straight hand ball.
Yep.
Keep going forward on it. That's his hands.
I'm going to switch back to the other camera for you.
Yeah, let's do just a quick double check. Yeah, okay, we got it.
Drew,
I'm recommending
a review for a potential handball on the goal. Just
So really clear handball situation, which wasn't seen by the officials. And it was exactly the type of situation that we're there to capture, not because the referee has a really bad decision, just because he couldn't see it from where he was. And that's what VAR is there for, to capture those clear errors. Was it clear? Yes, it was. Was it a really bad referee decision? No, because look at the reaction of everybody else. Nobody else saw it either. And people could see, yes, that's what it's here for. And, you know, it does help us increase our accuracy on big decisions. So in 2019, before VAR intervention, we got 92.88 of big decisions correct of those reviewable plays. After VAR intervention, that went to 98.35. In 2020, it went up to 98.52. It's not 100%. Why is it not 100%? Well, because sometimes the VAR doesn't get involved when they should, in my opinion. And these are based on the view of me and Mark Geiger and Greg Barkey, the management team of Pro. And sometimes they don't recognise it and don't recommend a review. Sometimes they do recommend a review, the referee looks at it but doesn't change the call. So we're not perfect, but we're trying to push that number up closer towards 100% all of the time. One of the best success stories, though, I think, of VAR, at least in MLS, is goals. That's quite a busy slide, but the thing I want to focus your attention on is that goals given in MLS in 2020 was 952. Of those, only 41 saw all of them were checked, but only 41 saw an intervention. So 96% of goals in MLS were not subject to review. They were all checked, but only 4% saw the referee go to the screen to make a judgment whether the goal should stand or not. That's fantastic. That's a great message to the players and the fans. Say, go and celebrate your goal because there's a 96% chance it will stand. And actually, we managed to award 10 goals that weren't originally awarded because we delayed offside flags. Yes, we took 30 away because the assistant kept the flag down when they should have raised it, but we asked them to keep the flag down when there's benefit of the doubt, so that's going to happen. And of all the goals that were finally allowed to stand after VAR, 99.68 were correctly allowed to stand. So only 2 goals were allowed to stand or taken away that should have found a different result. That's a great story. If this is a league without VAR, that number would be higher into the 50s, I think. Think of the number of goals that are allowed to stand that are offside when you don't have VAR, for example. So really great messaging around goals. And bear in mind, we don't use offside lines in MLS. So that means we don't review as many as other leagues. We don't have the cameras in enough places in the stadiums to be able to put the lines in. We simply say to the VAR, look, the on-field decision will be made by the assistant who's really good at his job. Look at the footage. If it's clearly wrong based on the angle that you've got, maybe because of the positioning on the field with the offset, with the 18-yard line or the grass cuttings, then step in. But if it's not obvious, just say check complete. We believe the assistants, and that's working pretty well. I appreciate it's difficult in other countries where the broadcasters want to put lines across, but we don't have that. We also share on our website, proreferees.com, we share Insight. This is Greg Barkey, who does a piece every week.
I'm Greg Barkey from Pro. This is Inside Video Review for Week 30, one of the busiest weeks of the season, not only in terms of games, but reviews. 9 reviews in 18 games. 3 for offside, 4 penalty kicks, and 2 red cards. In this edition, we'll focus on all the offside decisions, plus 3 of the penalty kicks, 2 of which involved San Jose. Well, let's start in Montreal, where a review for offside...
And then Greg goes through all the footage and shares the commentary and the comms and shows the angles that you've just seen, for example, that type of thing. One of the things that we did in MLS's back, and again, I'll just stop sharing for a second so I can optimize this. One of the things we did at MLS's back is broadcast that. MLS's back, by the way, was a tournament in Orlando after the 10 or 12 week break because of COVID. We restarted MLS down in Orlando in a bubble, in a tournament bubble where everybody was getting tested all the time, brought the teams down there and they played some games. And MLS wanted to broadcast the conversation between the VAR and the ref on the TV, which only happened in this environment. You know, it's not something we're planning to do in the here and now generally, but MLS were adamant they wanted this to happen. So it happened down in Orlando because they wanted to enhance the broadcast. And you'll hear Marufo speaking, I think, to Drew Fisher on this situation.
The best attacking player for the Earthquakes in that first half, and this keeps supplying him. Okay, again with Tommy Thompson following forward. Jackson Ewell towards Espinoza. He will reach it. Thompson taking on Hayes. They had to get that right. And they're looking at a handball, but it was actually looked really good defending once again from Hayes going back in. They were pretty adamant there was contact with the arm. Oh wow, there was. It's a harsh one, certainly not one that he's aware of, with the ball being a big moment this. Drew Fisher is the video assistant referee. He has recommended, by the looks of this, that Jem Marufo comes to check it out himself, which suggests that Fisher thinks it's a penalty. You see that clear contact, and it's going the way that the two of them are running as well. It's really harsh. Absolutely not intentional at all.
His arm in an position.
His arm's away from his body. Take a penalty, you would think.
Is the ball going to the hand? Playing at real speed.
Real speed.
Penalty.
Good. You heard the conclusion. Penalty kick. And a chance for the Quakes to get themselves.
So there you can hear Jaya and Drew speaking to each other, talking about is the arm away from the body, etc. People loved it, but I'm mindful that not everywhere in the world are we ready for that to happen. I think we need to be collectively moving forward together on many aspects of VAR, and that's one of them. So we'll look to maybe make a proposal at some point to FIFA that this can be allowed sometime down the line. We also always use the pitch side monitor, even for factual issues in MLS, because we think it helps the referee to sell the decision to the players having seen it for himself. And bear in mind, we're not using offside lines, so there's still an element of subjectivity around offside, even in our competition at least. Hence the reason that we use the monitor. But you'll see it doesn't always take that long.
To have a look at it just to be sure the ball was in a good
Is Alex Chilowicz?
So Alex Chilowicz on the advice of Fotis Bizakos, and again, it's based on the angles. Can you say this is clear and obviously over? And yes, you can. It's given us a goal.
That's a ball over the line, over the goal line. It took Alex 2 seconds to look at the screen and confirm it. You could say it's a waste of time. Probably was on that occasion, but a lot of the times we like the fact the referee takes a look and can take advantage of that. Let me just stop sharing again for these last few slides, and then we're finished, guys. But I hope you find this is interesting. Share again, guys. Sorry. Share. And the last few slides. So I've mentioned about we don't use lines because we don't have enough cameras in enough places in MLS to do that yet, in all games at least. It can be challenging for the VAR. So if you look at this game here between Kansas City and Portland, the player at the very bottom of the right of the picture is a guy called Johnny Russell from Scotland. He's potentially in an offside position, and clearly the Portland Timbers Twitter feed felt he was, because this led to a goal and it wasn't flagged offside, and they just sarcastically tweeted okay. But even though he might look offside, the camera angle distorts the image, and we know from our training that this can happen. So actually, when you look at this, Russell's not offside, because when you do put the lines in later, you can see that the player in the middle has held him onside. So that's some of the training that we do. The assistant is in line. He keeps his flag down. The VAR looks at this image and thinks, well, the assistant's in line. I know there's a camera distortion. I'm not getting near this. And they don't get involved, which is really cool. And when we have tried putting lines across without enough cameras, this is the problem that we have, in that we've got no camera behind the goal. So this is a game in New York City against San Jose. And the number 8, ignore the white 8, the number 9 scores the goal. But we can't see quite where he is because he's got a defender just in front of him. And where can we place the lines? So we don't even go there because we've got no other angle to find out where to place the lines. So until we've got that camera coverage, we're going to continue just dealing with the clear and obvious, even for offside. That's my overview of VAR, my overview of my career. Thank you, everybody, for listening and letting me speak for what could be like about an hour and 20 minutes there. And I hope you stayed awake.